Good afternoon everyone. Thank you for joining us for Microsoft Tools in 21st Century Learning Design. This is the second session of 4. You don't have to be at all of them, you can dip in and out of the series. My name is Jenny Mackay, I'm one of the Digital Skills Officers with Education Scotland. If you were here last week, don't worry, once we've done the core input, just for anybody who is dipping in and out, we're going to look at a little bit about what Microsoft's 21st Century Learning Design is, how it links to the course, and how you can use these rubrics. We're then going to touch on some of the tools. We're not really going to go into the tools in too much depth today, but I will show you where you can access online support materials, including videos, interactive, and just reading materials around all of the tools that we're covering this afternoon. And as I've said, next steps and help will be shared there as well. And then, as I've just mentioned, you'll also have time to go off and look at the course materials, the program build that's available in the Microsoft Teams where this call's taking place, and the resources that we're covering. Again, we always like to start just by highlighting every Glow user is entitled to 5 downloads of their Office suite. So thinking ahead for transitions and things like that, just making sure that our learners don't just necessarily need to be online to access the resources through Glow, but they can in fact download them to 5 different devices. They don't need to do it all at once. They can dip in and out, and that's for staff and learners. Please do spread the word. For those of you who are new to this, and again, if you were here last week, my apologies, but I want to make sure everybody's coming from the same place. 21st Century Design is based on research that was carried out by Microsoft. And what they discovered when they did this research was that there were 6 main dimensions that are built together. Each one has its own rubric, and when combined, they felt that learning had the greatest impact. So the first ones that we looked at last week were around knowledge construction, collaboration, and self-regulation, and we linked out how they might be similar to things that we already cover a lot in Scotland. We already talk a lot about metacognition, self-regulated learning. So we were able to highlight how those two things join up and how this piece of work that we're showing you today can link to resources and strategies that you might well already be using. They may just have a slightly different slant on them or be branded under a slightly different name. So the 6 strategies, the dimensions, all come with these core statements. Today we are focusing on right in the middle, real world problem solving and innovation. We're only looking at that one today. So it's defined as a task or a challenge for learners. It must be authentic. There should also be a product at the end of it that goes beyond the school or the person setting the challenge within the academic situation, and we'll come on to that in a second. So this is our main focus for today. Lots of it also links into Skills Development Scotland 4.0, and again we'll touch on that in a second. So just to link back to the research that took place, there's a PDF of my PowerPoint in this file space, and it's dated today, so you'll see a PDF for today if you want to take a look, and all of it is hyperlinked up. But in amongst these 6 dimensions, they identified that there were 3 core concepts. So learner-centred pedagogy. As we know, we're building where learning is personalised. Learners have to self-regulate, they want to build their knowledge, they're able to identify gaps in their own learning as well as set challenges for themselves to develop their next steps. Where they're then going to extend their learning, and that's the second phase of this, looking at problem solving as we are today. Glow is talked about often as being an anywhere, anytime resource. Now, obviously this is Microsoft and Glow has Microsoft products, but it's a flexible model where we can learn and we can access everything wherever suits us best and in whatever strategy and tool works best for us. And then obviously looking at making us more aware or making our learners more aware around global and cultural understanding. And there's a range of tools in Microsoft. Obviously there's lots of other products that are available, but again, this is Microsoft. So you might want to use, for example, closed captions or the auto-translate features that are available, or immersive reader, and we touched on some of those last week too. And then again, Interestingly, for it being a tech company, ICT integration is last. So in Scotland, we would refer to that as digital technologies. We've moved away when the curriculum was updated from ICT to digital technologies, but how they could be embedded if they will improve the learning. So obviously I'm from the digital team. We would argue there's lots of ways that it can improve learning, but it's not just changing a lesson for changing a lesson's sake. It's about that added value that we want our young people to gain by including these digital skills. Also, and this is really important, for them to be able to transfer the knowledge between different products, because when they're problem solving, we want them to be independent. We want them to be able to transfer skills, knowledge and understanding within one topic or one project that they've done to another in order to better improve the solution. So again, I did mention the SDS Skills Development Scotland 4.0, the meta skills, and for this one we're looking at that central box in particular. So whenever you're working within a team, they are having to use a great deal of social intelligence, especially when we are solving problems, and when they're working independently, they're identifying and using these range of self-management tools and developing them. But we also want them to look at the innovation, and that's the strategies that we would be encouraging and tie nicely in with these 21st century learning design skills. So we want them to be able to make sense of the problem, think about things, think it through from a range of different options, demonstrate curiosity, and one of the things we'll talk about is who leads the project. And I don't mean that in so much as who's going to be in charge of what, but actually when setting the problem for young people or discussing it with them, actually them having the understanding to self-direct and self-regulate what they're doing and accessing all of the materials that they'll require. These obviously also link into future industry roles that they might want to take on in terms of world of work. When they're thinking about 21st century skills and the real world problem solving and innovation, there's three main things: develop a solution, complete the task, and design a complex product. So it's not a case of having a chat and then thinking about just what might work best, telling somebody and that being the end of it. That might be part of it. However, for it to be a truly innovative and real world problem solving activity, it should be learner led. Again, just touching on those that we spoke about there: developing teamwork, using creativity and innovative thinking in order to complete these, being independent and reaching out. We want them to be able to think about a problem in context, we want them to come up with solutions and designs, and we want them to use a range of things such as real life data and real problem solving to complete the activity and think beyond the challenge that's been given to them. So there's a range of tools that they could use to collaborate, because obviously, hopefully we're seeing that collaboration is key during all of this. However, when we're thinking exactly what this real world problem solving skill is that we cover in the Microsoft Certified Educator Program, the problems have to be these four things. So they have to be about real people who may experience this problem. So it can't, like I say, just be abstract. It might address a specific audience or person beyond the school. So for example, if you're doing some research, it can't just be that you hand it into the teacher. It might be that you link to industry. So an example might be you carry out your project, you do your investigation, you try and find solutions to solve the problem. Often we speak about STEM ambassadors, linking out with them, but actually maybe it's asking a STEM ambassador to set a challenge, set that problem, and then the groups have to present to the STEM ambassador to see if this would be a solution that would solve their problem. We're aiming to have a target audience beyond just me as the practitioner in the classroom. So having specific contexts, as we just mentioned, and if you are using data, making sure that it's real. So an example I'll talk about later is about not just using, for for example, in maths books, textbooks, you always get like timetables and things like that, so that when we're teaching time, there's examples that could be used, but actually trying to access that data for real, going on live websites from, for example, bus companies. If you're here and you're a secondary staff member and you're from one of the Scottish smart cities, there's a whole load of open source data that's available. These are all data points that you can then use to incorporate within products such as Excel, and it's all available open source on the internet for you. If you're not sure, have a chat with your digital person at your local authority. They might be able to point you in the direction of some open source data. Also the university that might be nearest to your set. Trying to use real data, not just interpreted data that's been provided for this. And I recognise, like my background is primary and early years, I recognise it's not always relevant to do this, as I mentioned at the start, so you have to choose when you want to apply this, but where possible, these are the strategies that we ask, or this project asks for. So as we've said, we want our young people to be independent. We want them to identify the parameters of the problem. We want them to be able to come up with their own solution, and that's really key. So the practitioner is there to facilitate the learning experiences that are going on. However, young people should be able to address or develop in skills so that they can address these independently. So we want them to be able to generate ideas amongst their teammates or their group that they're working in, and come up with alternatives that might work better or as an alternative possibility to the initial solution that they may have created. And we see that a lot in sort of subjects like CDT and design, where you might come up with an idea and it morphs into something else. Art is another one where that happens quite a lot. So we want them to be able to devise their own approach to solving the problem. It shouldn't be teacher-led. We want to give them all the information that they need to get started, but what we try not to do with this is we try not to give them all the info to solve the problem. So it's finding that line and using products like OneNote, using resources, for example, such as Whiteboard, allows them to collaborate easily with each other, share resources, use a range of media to capture their understanding and share it, and for you as practitioner to have oversight into it for the whole process, because we don't want to give them the whole system. And we then need them to come up with a coherent solution to test their solution and share it. And again, it's that beyond. Microsoft have produced these rubrics, and again, if you were here last week, each of these 6 dimensions that I mentioned have one of these rubrics attached. So if a group were carrying out a real world problem solving and innovation activity, and we were looking at it, we would identify whether or not, for example, in level 2, the learning activity is mainly problem solving, but it's not real world. So it's that abstract thing that we spoke about at the beginning. So we would say that's probably just a level 2. So what do we need to do to get to level 3? Well, we need it to be real world for a start. So that could be, and I've got some examples, but that could be to do with traffic. It could be to redesign underused space, etc. We also want them to work collaboratively and come up with their own solutions, but they may not be innovating. But ideally what we want is our learners to be at level 4. So we want them to have shared responsibility. We want them to have a real world problem solving experience. We want them to be innovative when they're coming up with this, and we want the substantive decisions to be interdependent. I hope that rubric helps in terms of assessing where your lesson might be. So when you've written out your lesson or your topic plan, if it's an IDL piece of work that you're doing, you might then be able to identify, looking back at maybe self-regulated learning or collaborative things, which digital tool could fit in, but also which level your current lesson is and whether or not you want to change it. And there's a tree at the end, and I'll show you that in just a second. So we've got some examples. So if you're learning about, for example, traffic safety, we could initially do discussions about road safety and create posters. I know that's something I've done with my classes before. It's something that happens quite a lot. However, if we're using the real world problem solving strategy the way that Microsoft are suggesting, we would be looking at alternative routes for a fictional school. So although we're not using a real school, we are using real data. So we could look up facts about traffic. We could have people coming in and talking to us about from city planning about what they look for in terms of what causes congestion. We could relate that to our local environment as well, so that we could still apply it. And we could then look at proposing new parking spaces based on real life maps. So that could be Google Maps, could be based on GIS maps, if depending again on the age or stage of your class, looking at where populations are really blooming. And where you know that there might be traffic coming in from because there's a big population maybe at the back of the school, and so that has lots and lots of congestion. So again, it's not just putting it in one context, it's using available data where possible that's real to either create it for a fictional school, but linking in with people who have real life jobs within that environment, and then coming up with real life solutions that you can share with them. An example for writing or literacy might be that you look at a historical novel and that you initially your first thought might be to create a quiz on what's been read. However, rather than that, look at the story from another character's perspective. So you're not only just having to look at the story and rewrite the story or answer questions on it, but you're still having to convey the right information, but you're having to interpret it in an alternative way. Alternatively, because I'm digital, you might want to use something like stop motion animation or create it in a digitally graphic way using things like iPads, or there's a range of other tools that you can use. One nice way with that would be you might want to create the story in a storyboard and use 3D characters. So you could still use, again, age and stage, you know, your learners. You might want to use 3D modelling. That doesn't necessarily have to be using like a CAD piece of software. Every Windows device has Paint 3D on it. I'll just go through a couple more slides and then I'll show you that. But that could then be incorporated by putting it into PowerPoint and using the PowerPoint to continue to tell the story, printing off your PowerPoint and creating that storyboard effect or a kind of graphic novel, but you have 3D interactive model tools as well. So you're still having to think about it, you're having to think about the character, you're having to use actual information from a book, but you're having to interpret it. So those were the ones that we would try and tie up together. But then how does that link with innovation? So for innovation, what you're trying to do there is, I've got too many windows open, sorry everyone. So for innovation, you want them to be able to take the learning that's happened, apply it to the real world, but then use that information to implement an alternative idea. So for example, excuse me, they might have an open space like I mentioned earlier. Think about the community garden. So they've come up with lots of solutions. They don't want it to be vandalized, but they've come up with an alternative solution to use it, for example, as a garden or a quiet reflection area that the school can use, but actually it's there for the whole community, excuse me. So again, linking back to our traffic safety, we could be again looking at fictional maps, but we want to use real-time maps, bus data that's live on the website. And again, that's that open source data because it lets you see often the maps of where the buses are. The most relatable one to that people are familiar with is like the gritters in winter, where you can track them going around. Quite a lot of cities also have that for their buses. So again, using real life data where it's appropriate, and that links into the energy waste in the school one. So many schools are obviously trying to reduce energy. So you might have a group tracking the data for the electric meter with help from your facilitator staff, your facilities staff. It may be that actually it's a short-term project with your local authority who are coming on board to help out monitor usage of lights, capturing where the light levels are really high, what would reduce that. If there's areas where actually putting in plants might improve air quality. And again, these are things you might want to reach out to your local authority. It may be that you want to reach out to STEM ambassadors. They have huge wealth of people that can come and chat to you. There's lots of research online looking at the impact of introducing plants in your classroom. Does it matter if there's plants in or no plants? Do they improve the oxygen levels? How do you monitor them? Is there tools? Could you program, again, age and stage dependent, can you program something to capture air quality and light quality for learning and teaching? So these are just some ideas which link to the innovation. So we're just building on, and again, hopefully none of these things, well, I know that they won't be new to you. These are things that people do all the time. But again, when we're collaborating with our teammates on solving these problems, using resources such as OneNote and tags, using things to track our project like lists, and I'll just look at them shortly with you. And again, just to highlight that some of the resources, I'm not going to cover all of these. We are going to look at Minecraft, Stream, and creating like podcasts where you could give top tips. So one thing that a school that I used to work with did, it was a teacher had created like a vlogging booth. This was about 5 years ago. She'd created a vlogging booth and the kids went in. The young learners would record their own piece and it became part of a class vlog. You could use something like Stream to share that in your setting. It could also be uploaded to, again, you would need to speak to your digital leads in your local authority because every authority is different. But you might have it on a sharing platform, or it might be from OneNote, and you could put that into a OneNote where it's shared. You may also want young people to capture in their group, have a shared forum. So forums can, I'm not going to tell you about forums too much because you're all totally familiar, but not only could they be used within the wider community or within the school community to survey, access information that's real live information and data, but it could be for them to upload and share resources, findings as they're going. So it's all going into one shared folder. So, as well as this, so if you're thinking this is all great, but I don't really know where to start with this if it doesn't fit neatly into the projects, because I recognise how busy, I mean, the last few years have been incredibly busy, but I also recognise this time of year is immensely busy between exams, transition, end of term, all sorts. So we have provided, as part of the MCE, these real world problem solving anchor lessons. So the ones that are linked to this dimension, real world problem solving and innovation, are listed here. And all of the activities are available in the team in the skills channel. There's a OneNote and all the anchor lessons are in there. So if you do also want to have a little look at these lessons yourself, you can go to the skills channel, the introduction channel, and then up at the top, if it's depending on the size of your device, you might need to click this once more, and it's the 21st CLD participant course book. All of the activities are in there for you to look at, the 5 that I've listed. So you've got your activities that are suggested that you might want to start with. There's nothing saying you have to start with them. You can align your lesson plan to the rubric based on what you want, if it's maybe not one of the lessons. But what I really like about this as well is that you can then go off and have a look at the problem solving. So are my young people problem solving? Are they maybe, are they having to problem solve, or have I given them the problem and provided them with everything that they need to solve it? If the answer is I gave them everything, then actually they're not really solving anything is at level 1. If it's a real world problem, but we're asking them to find the solution that they think without me providing it, level 2. And if they're having to take it that step further where they're innovating it and they're coming up with something really creative, not just saying what they think the solution is, but actually coming up with the solution using real life information and being quite innovative with their response, it would be level 3 or 4. Also, just really quickly wanted to highlight these 2 resources, but I'm going to come back to that. So let me come out, and I just wanted to flag up, I did mention this very briefly last time. When your young people are self-regulating, they might want to use a range of different tools. So one of the ones that they might want to use for collaboration or self-regulation is they might want to use tools like Whiteboard. So if you're unfamiliar with the new Whiteboard features, let me just go back out here. It's a blank canvas that's available to you. It's visual and it allows you to be able to have shared responsibilities. It could be a work task board. It could be an ideas board for creating and combined thinking. Or you could just be asking young people to share it in a team space using the add new tab, and you can be asking them to add reactions. When they're in here, they can digitally ink, they can add on, or they can add in any of these. There's a whole range of templates in there for them for problem solving. For example, the fishtail bone. There's a whole range of different resources. So these templates can go in, they can still be edited. And here all I've done is a post-it note challenge where I want them to think about, list the ideas in the first column, give it a thumbs up using the reactions in the second one, and then they might want to copy it into what they love, what they don't like, what they're not sure of, and what their takeaway thing in their heart would be. Okay. I have a lot of hands up, so I'm just going to check if they're residual before I carry on. Miss Thompson, would you like to come in? It might just be historic hands up from audio. Mrs. Black? Might also be.
Hi Janie, yeah, it was just from the audio.
Oh, no problem, thank you. No worries. Okay, so again, thinking about our teamwork, we would collaborate, we could share this, but we can also use it to track what we're doing, and we can use our teams as well, the tabs, to add in our forums that we're collaborating on. But if you haven't used Whiteboard, I would suggest having a wee look at it. The desktop version that's available on any Windows device, you can sign in with your Glow account or your own tenancy if your local authority has its own, but it can sync up desktop to online, and there are slightly more features. However, it's had a lot of work in the last wee while, so I would suggest taking a look. One of the other tools that I did mention would be the planning tool. So I've edited a tracker that I use for just for myself. So for this, my group might create a planner, or I might ask them to create it and add me in. So we could create a new plan. And what they would do is only the people in the plan see it. And so for oversight, I would want in as the practitioner. And it allows them to use that self-regulation strategy to task themselves with activities. So if I go to add new, I can do demo plan Monday. And I would always make it private and create plan. There are videos and resources available and all the things that I'm showing you, so I'm just going to whiz through them because I want you to kind of get an idea and then you can explore. So you can see here with members, you can add new members. I'm only the one, so it'll only let me add myself to tasks. But when I add a task, I might say, okay, so we're going to investigate, and then we could put in what we're going to investigate. We're going to say to the group when that's going to be by, and we're going to assign it. If there's 5 people in the group, it would give me a list of 5 names there. There's only me, so I'm just going to assign it to myself. So I'll assign that task to myself. This is also useful if you're like me and you quite like a plan. Select add. You can go back in or your groups can go back in, more importantly, and they can tap in any notes that they're doing to say what their progress is, so they've got that level of accountability. They could add an attachment, so say they've recorded some content, they could add in some information, they want to put in a link to a resource, they've maybe found something out, or they've seen a design that would solve a problem. So again, thinking of maybe like climate change or conservation for rainforests, oceans, etc. They may want to use those, and they can add them in at any time. There's a whole space for comments, and then it would be live to everybody, and when they go back to their hub, it would always be there. Boards can be seen in two ways. They can be seen as boards, like those little cards. It can be seen as a chart where you can see all the different progress, who's doing what down the side if it's completed, or it can be seen as a schedule, which is like a calendar. And again, they can just add it in there so that the whole group has that overview and that whole sense of information. So they've got their knowledge construction from maybe work that's been done. They've been set their challenge and they're collaborating using whiteboards, and then they're using self-regulation, using planners and other features such as that. So this one is Planner. The other app that you may or may not have used that fits nicely into this is Lists. If you haven't used Lists and you do like lists, it's really addictive. It would be my wee word of caution. So again, you can really simply just create a new list by adding new list. Your young people would decide which one. I would suggest start with a blank list rather than use any of these sort of templates. When you create a list, you can create columns. So again, giving young people that sense, when we spoke at the start about not giving all the information they need, you might have a conversation with the group or with the whole class around what information do we need to capture, and then asking them to create a blank list. So if we just call this one Demo Monday 2, give it a colour, give it a little icon and create. So it's as simple as that. Similar to other sites, you would just add columns, so a bit like Excel. You can alert the owner of it. So if somebody's project managing, again, that sense of responsibility, they can set up to get alerts anytime anything is done, and they can add a new item in. So similar to what we had there, we've not got many tabs here because what we need to do is add in a column. So we might want to choose location. So maybe we're looking at traffic. So we're going to say, what is the location? We know it's location, and we're going to say what information we need them to give. So we might say street address or postcode. So we're going to monitor hotspots and click save. And you'll see there that it's automatically filled those in. Now, if I go in and I add a new item, it should eventually, I really think my account is not playing ball, it'll let you see all of the bands. You can add in tags so that again you've got that whole level of accountability and sharing. It just is next steps from to do. So to do is just to do, you write an item, you tick it off. Lists, and particularly Planner, are a really nice way to combine kind of what you're doing, work collaboratively and share that responsibility. And again, it gives that sense of, within Microsoft, they talk a lot about like an authentic audience for the creation of your work. So again, this is much more similar to maybe work that you might do where you have to create something online. There's an accountability with it. It's not just you saying you're going to do something and then it not being shown anywhere. Okay, so the other one, if you are just, I'm not going to touch on this too much, but on OneNote, you can use a range of tags. So again, it might be that you have a class OneNote that's set up with a range of learners that they all can only see their own piece of work, but they're going to collaborate in the collaboration space. We have a huge range of videos. If you're not familiar with class OneNote, we have a 1 hour webinar on it, but we also have about 13 bite-sized 3 to 5 minute videos on all the features you may wish to dip in and out of. So the collaboration space works like graffiti walls essentially. You can set a challenge or a question. So here all I've done is I have incorporated a reflect question. A reflect is not in Glow yet, but there is a little bit of it in OneNote. So just to be very clear, you may be able to add a reflect question. And here I've asked, so it's got starters, and it's saying, how motivated are you about learning about? Now you can't change that bit of the sentence. So within this, you can't change the start, you can only change the end. And then hovering over, my young people would identify which button they are, and it would give me a bar that I would see. What you should see is this page. So every young person that's signed in would see that window that you saw in my OneNote, but what I'm seeing is how people are feeling, and it would then let me see. Like I say, there's only 5 questions. It's only available, this sort of little add-in bit in class OneNote, so it's just to make you aware and that you might want to look out for in your OneNote. So we've got features where we could ask some questions and we can use that as a prompt for discussions. We could also ask our young people in their own section, and there maybe like we could give them a class notes section, and we might want them to put in, create a reading list that they're going to do they're going to investigate from their research. So up here, going up, using tags, and we want them book to read, and they're going to create that. And what we can then get them to do is use a checklist as well. So we're going to ask them to do a tick list. So once they've done it, they can tick it off. And that way I've got oversight in the reading materials, but they're responsible, they're demonstrating it. They might also want to do an interview with somebody from that industry. So again, we can get them to add in an audio clip. So we can ask them to really quickly just go in here and record whatever's going on, and with the person's permission, obviously, of course, add in their audio file, and then they can have that in there. Alternatively, for any learner who's perhaps neurodivergent or needs some additional support, we could ask them to use their OneNote, put it in that space, and use the dictate tool so that their interview is automatically being popped into there. They could paste a YouTube clip in. There are additional support features in here. For example, Immersive Reader, where it uses visual dictionaries to support. It will also translate it into additional languages, and you can change the background and the colour depending on maybe if overlays are required or if it's just more easier on your eye. For example, I seldom use white back. So I'm going to just really quickly, I promise I'm not going to go into forums in depth, but I do want to highlight this. Lots of people use forms. We know that one of the features of forms that you may not be using yet, that you might find useful for collaboration and real world problem solving, is adding in a question, which is a file upload. So I recognise some of you might be familiar with this and using it, but some of you may not. So you could ask your traditional questions using the add new question button. Here you can see I've added a question in, and it allows my users of the forum to upload a file. So this might be useful if a group are gathering information. If we think back to like the traffic one, where they want to take photographs of ideas that they've seen, or maybe underutilized spaces, and they're capturing ideas that they like or identifying potential solutions, but they want to put it all in one place really quickly. So they might put it on their phone and then upload those photos. And all that would happen is when it comes in, it would show me the answers. It shows me what has been submitted, and if I open that one up, if I hover, it gives me a hyperlink. All the files that are uploaded go to the person who created the forum's OneDrive. They can share that, and I'll show you that in a second. So although it's going to that original person's OneDrive, that folder can then be shared. So come out of this. If we go to questions, add new, and then go along to the end and select add more. And again, there's a section on DigiLearn that's about 6 minutes long that shows this a bit slower. Select file upload, type in your question, and all you're going to do is choose what the maximum number of files that can be sent to you are. So you might want to use this for coursework, you might want to use it as part of a survey, or you might just want somebody to just submit one answer, one forum, one photo, or one document. You can also choose how big the document is, so you can say 10 to 1 gigabyte. I would say seldom would you want it at 10. I would say, as a general rule of thumb, just set it at 1 gig anyway, regardless of how many files. Pop that in, and when you're happy, just click Add New. Whenever you're sharing, the only thing to know about this is only Glow users can respond. So this isn't something you could put out to like your community and say post in your ideas. It has to be a Glow user, because what we want is somebody who's already adhering to the rules around Glow of using it for appropriate learning and teaching. The user would see the question, they would select upload, and it would then just let them upload the photograph. So if I then go to my OneDrive, and there's a folder right at the top that says apps. In that folder, you'll see one for Microsoft Forums. Select Forums, and you'll see the name of any forum that you have shared out one of those file upload questions in. So you can see these are the ones that I created ahead of today. This one has 2 items in it, this one has 1. I'm not currently sharing it, but if I go to my folder, I can select share, and I can share that with my teammates. So my team could be all seeing the resources that are coming in. And again, it's that live data that's so important for real world problem solving. When I go into a folder, you'll see there's 2 different questions that are allowed for upload. So that was the original one, that's the one we just made. And when I go in there, all of the resources are available to me. If I go in, if I hit version history and details, it'll let me see who's uploaded it. It's worth playing around with. If you've not used it before, it's worth using. And again, you've got that authentic audience that you're going to be using this data from and for, and you're working collaboratively. And because it's teamwork and group work, you're sharing that out. If you've not already seen it, that things that sort of complement the 21st century learning design resources are DigiLearnScot and Education Scotland have 2 documents. So they're on the Education Scotland website. However, again, like I say, this is linked, or you can scan these QR codes. Features of highly effective digital learning is level 5 illustrations around what digital learning within your classroom, your setting may look like. And it's split into 4 categories. So planning, learning, teaching and assessing. So it's a really nice, short, snappy way, and it accompanies Higgius really nicely. What digital learning might look like, if you're thinking, okay, how else what other digital resources can I use beyond Microsoft, because I recognise this is very Microsoft heavy, you may also want to look at that, and it gives you just some alternative ways that you may not have thought of, or ways that you may have thought of but with a slightly new slant on them. So please do check those resources out. DigiLearnScot has a huge range of resources as well as part of the Education Scotland offering, and here, for example, is the Office 365. You'll see it in professional learning. If you just scroll down at that bottom corner, Office 365, alternatively through any of these tabs, we have these sort of hotspots that take you to all the resources for different products. Alternatively, you can go to the YouTube channel up at the top, and they're all in there too. Glow Connect has a whole range of resources. If you go with Help with Glow, Microsoft 365. So again, not around 21st century learning design, but if you want to know more about some of the resources that I've spoken about. And if you want to do the Microsoft Educator course, there's a whole learning path available to you on there, including little bite-sized quizzes for you. And like I say, section in the Teams channel, select channel 1, and then up at the top you're looking for notebook that says 21st century learning design. If you don't see it, click on one more and you'll find it in there. Okay. If you have colleagues that you think would enjoy taking part in the courses, either the Microsoft Office Specialist or the Certified Educator ones, there's a QR code, please ask them to. And also, just because I said I would, I mentioned 3D design. So if you are doing something like redesigning a space, this is, for example, just a Roman helmet, but it's 3D. So if you've used Paint on your device, but you haven't tried it in 3D, this is just to let you see, these can then be exported and put into PowerPoint. And again, we've covered all of that on our DigiLearnScot, and we'll have more webinars coming up about things like that. But please do explore 3D shapes and brushes in Paint 3D, because it is fab. There's a 10-minute tutorial on Paint 3D in DigiLearnScot too, or there's a course for Microsoft if you want to go with them.